Okay. Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. My name is Nagla Riz. I'm professor of economics at the American University in Cairo's School of Business and the founding director of the Access to Knowledge for Development Center, again at AUC School of Business. Access to Knowledge for Development Center, A2K4D, is a regional research center working on global, regional, and local, with global, regional, and local partners on issues related to knowledge, technology, and development in the Middle East and Africa, with focus on inclusion in the digital economy. We launched in February 2010, so we turn 12 next week. Today's webinar is titled Women in Work Post-Covid-19, Egypt's Informal Digital Economy. We hold the webinar in proud partnership with Friedrich-Ebert Stiftung, FES Egypt. The webinar picks up from a series of webinars conducted by A2K4D in collaboration with FES Egypt throughout 2020 and 2021 on topics relevant to digitization, inclusion, and the impact of COVID-19 on the digital economy. I have a few logistics to share with you before we begin. So I will ask Khadija to post the webinar is being recorded. Once we start, we will mute everyone. Kindly stay on mute with camera off throughout the session. Please write all your questions in the chat box to everyone, or as a comment on the Facebook live stream, or tweet to webinar hashtag A2K4D times FES. Panelists are able to mute and unmute themselves. The duration is 75 minutes. I will ask the speakers to be concise in their, the panelists in their responses, so that we leave some room for Q&A in the end. Without further ado, I invite Richard Probst, Resident Representative of FES Office in Cairo, to say a few words. Richard, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Richard. I'm the Resident Director here in Cairo of FES, Friedrich-Ebert Foundation. And thanks, Nagla, for the introduction. FES, Friedrich-Ebert Stiftung, is a German political foundation, the oldest German political foundation with an office presence in Egypt since 45 years. And I'm very glad to have you all participants, but especially also all the speakers, whom I would like to thank a lot, to attend our webinar today. As you said, Nagla, it's a series of webinars. So our partnership with A2K4D dates back to 2018 and before. And I'm very glad that as a social democratic foundation, we are focusing on two topics which are crucial for us and which are part of our DNA. One is, of course, the future of work and work in general. And the informal digital economy is part of the future of work, but also as a feminist organization, of course, also like to focus on a very particular group, and this is women. I would like to thank all the speakers for joining us, but especially a great thanks and shout out to all the staff of Nagla from A2K4D for the preparation of this webinar. And I, as you are very, it does not happen very often that there's an all-female panel. We are more used to all-male panel. So if you're the only male speaker during, among a distinguished group of female speakers, I think the male speakers should actually shut up, be quiet, and listen. And this is what I want to do. And I'm happy to have you all and looking forward to all the insights, and wish you all a nice webinar. Thank you.
Many thanks, Richard and FES Egypt, for their wonderful partnership. Today's webinar is titled Women in Work Post-COVID-19, Egypt's Informal Digital Economy. As Richard mentioned, it's part of research where we aim to investigate realities and capture narratives of women work in the digital economy. This is an outcome of the series of work that we did with FES, and it's a finding actually. Throughout our research and our webinars over the past few years, we have noticed this new form of work that we want to zoom in and talk more about. We zoom in on Egypt. We study women entrepreneurship, online business owners that sell via social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. It is a super interesting business model that we'd like to know more about. We want to identify and learn more about this new form of entrepreneurship. We want to look at it in our research. We're looking at it against two groups of women, work for women who work in the platform or gig economy, like driving Uber, or women who work in the traditional informal sector. The women we are looking at today are in neither of those groups. There's, again, as I mentioned, it's a new form of entrepreneurship, super interesting, that has actually found a place for itself, especially after COVID-19 and the increase in digitization. It has birthed this new form of online businesses. Now, as we know, when new technologies create opportunities and result in productivity gains, there are always challenges and concerns of widening the digital divide. So there is also the context of Egypt realities. We live in Egypt. We are aware that there is a high rate of female unemployment, reaching more than 20% of the female labor force, which is already 20% of the total labor force in Egypt. Also, the numbers vary, but according to one ILO estimate, the share of informal female employment is almost 60% out of female employment. In addition, we understand that women, and we know they bear the brunt of unpaid care work at home. We've seen what happened, around us during, the onset of COVID-19. And we are also aware of the gender gap in the Egyptian labor force, and the fact that actually the pandemic jeopardized informal communities anyway, regardless of the gender. So in the spirit of wanting to understand more, learning more, we are very happy to have the webinar, and I am very actually eager to present our wonderful line of speakers in alphabetical order of last name. We have, and I'm going to say a couple of lines on each speaker. Of course, doesn't do them enough credit, but in the interest of time. So Christina Harab, country representative of UN Women Egypt Country Office. She has worked on gender equality and women's human rights in the UN system for over 20 years, with a vast experience all over the globe. And I mean, literally, you should just see the regions and the countries that she has worked in. Next, we have Rania Atif. Rania is the founder of I Make This, a startup created for women, for small business, to be able to introduce and market their businesses for free. The platform started as a Facebook group in December 19 and helped over 4,000 women introduce their business. Today, the platform has more than 250K followers in different social media outlets and is an e-commerce platform with more than 400 women opening their online stores and 20,000 monthly visitors. Third, we have Hoda Sadda, a professor of English and Comparative Literature, Faculty of Arts at Cairo University, and founding member and current board chair of the Women in Memory Forum, مؤسسة المرأة والذاكرة, and with long experience in advocating for women's rights. Last but not least, we have my good friend Marwa Sharafuddin, who's a visiting fellow at Harvard Law School's program on law and society in the Muslim world, co-founder and member of Musawa, global movement for equality and justice in the Muslim family. Marwa played a critical role in seminal international publications. I just cite one example, the UN's Gender, Justice and Law Arab Region Report. As I said, these women come in with a rich track of experience in their area of expertise, and I invite you to look up their extended bios. I will stop now in the interest of time, and I will make way for my colleague Nadine Waheba, our Associate Director for Research Global Networks at A2K4D, to share with you a bit more of the preliminary results of the research, the pilot research that we started on this issue, and initial findings from Egypt pilot research, before I then take over the 2 rounds of discussion with our panelists. Welcome, panelists, and Nadine, forward to you.
Right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Nagla, and thank you to all the panelists and Richard and everyone participating for joining us today. So like Dr. Nagla mentioned, the focus of our study and what we're sharing with you today is our research on women-led businesses operating through social media in the digital economy here in Egypt. So I'll take the next few minutes to share some information about our methodology and the women we've interviewed without giving away too much about their identities. and some key insights from an initial set of interviews that we've just completed. So like I said, today we're sharing insights from 5 initial interviews we've conducted so far. And the focus is on women-led, run-from-home businesses selling their products via platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and also through WhatsApp. After we conducted background research, a lot of which was via the I Make This group on Facebook. So we're actually very happy to have Rania with us today. And also through relying on our personal contacts, we began curating a list of the many online informal businesses led by women. We developed our questions and we reached out to the women for some interviews. And the information was obtained orally through semi-structured interviews, which we conducted via Zoom and phone calls. And the participants, of course, signed a consent form to protect their and their businesses' identities for research clearance purposes. So some key insights and demographics about our interviewees so far. These are insights from just 5 interviews with women aged from 24 to 54 who run their online businesses via social media. They all have higher education degrees. One of them is an older single mom. 2 are younger moms. All of these 3 have previous 9-to-5 job experiences. And we also had a recent graduate as well as a student. These women all run their businesses online. Some of them do have websites, but again, it's mainly through social media. They operate in the food industry, in fashion, in makeup and cosmetics, and in kids' toys, accessories, and apparel. The businesses they started are about 2 to 3 years old, with one of them starting as early as 2012. That was one of them. So I'm going to share a few key insights, and just to note that these are, of course, very preliminary insights and are not meant to be representative of what we've come to realize is a spectrum of women-owned online businesses in the informal digital economy in Egypt. So the first insight is that all the women cited flexibility as a key driver for women to engage in the digital economy. Several of our interviewees cited flexibility as a reason for adopting this type of work, whether it is to be able to take care of their kids, family circumstances such as an ill family member, or trying to work while being a student. While they cited flexibility as a pro and convenience, there were also challenges to this type of work. For example, the young moms were saying that they were waking up at dawn to be able to work before their kids wake up, then they handle their kids, then they work again when they put their kids to sleep. They also identified other shortcomings like the instability and fluctuation of the income. And perhaps unique to online work, a challenge identified was mastering technology as well as understanding and using social media effectively. So our third insight is that women in this digital business area are not a uniform group. Our interviewees and the background research so far indicate that there's a very wide spectrum of these women-led businesses, ranging from those targeting customers with luxury, high-end products to those looking for more cost-friendly products online. Our research also points out that the playing field in the digital economy in this specific sector is by no means a level one. There are a lot of inequalities amongst the group in terms of educational attainment, different levels of skills acquisition in terms of digital skills, business skills, marketing, financial, even languages was cited several times as a possible barrier, as well as in access to connectivity and to finance, amongst other enablers of possibly more equitable participation. This is an area we definitely like to explore more. The fourth insight pertains to the impact of COVID-19. As we know, the pandemic dealt a disproportionate blow to the informal sector and especially to women in the informal sector. Unique to the online businesses, we found that the women we've interviewed actually experienced a boom during the pandemic. Many of them, or all of the 5 that we spoke to, it's obviously because people were not able to shop physically and hence turned to online shopping. Just to give you an example from 2 of our interviews, one of them who bakes healthy food at home, mainly for kids, she said that she saw a boom in her business because parents are suddenly shifting to working online and they needed quick, healthy options for their kids. Another one who makes the kids' toys and apparel and that sort of thing said her brand was actually born as a result of COVID. A lot of moms, a certain category, again, a lot of moms either buy imported products or travel regularly to buy things. Because of the pandemic, she was forced to try and do this on her own. And this is how her business started and actually became a huge success. Fifth and final initial insight here pertains to formalizing and scaling their businesses. A few of the interviewees were favorable to formalizing their business with news here in Egypt of formalizing online content creators and taxing social media and that's social media content creators and that sort of thing. They were favorable to this mainly because of scaling plans they have. So for example, to be able to sell through platforms like Souk or Amazon now and Noon and that type of thing, they need to have sort of a larger formalized business. Others explain that this is specific to the industry that they're in. For example, in the food industry, an interviewee mentioned that it would give her peace of mind, especially if she starts to scale and there starts to be any complaints about food quality. All of the 5 interviewees were weary of the possible cumbersome regulations, of course, added cost of taxation and the paperwork. So this is an area that we need to investigate further. What next? Our next steps include obviously soliciting feedback from our great panelists and participants today. We hope to go back to the field to conduct several other interviews within this group. And also we'd like to speak to women working in the gig or platform economy, which we've spoken to before. We'd like to follow up on that. So women, for example, in ride sharing, and also of course to a few women working in traditional and formal work. We'd also like to see, with the recent efforts to regulate the growing online business sector, we'd like to explore what policies and what support could be put in place to proactively support women's participation and ensure it's more inclusive in this area. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Nadine.
Sure.
Thank you very, very much. So now let me turn to our wonderful panelists and let's start our first round of discussion. And I will ask each panelist to stick to up to 5 minutes. And allow me to start with Rania to tell us more about I Make This. Please tell us more about the story, what opportunities, what challenges, how can we learn more from you to take this further for the benefit of all stakeholders involved. To you, Rania, up to 5 minutes, please, in this round. Thank you.
Okay, let me try and make this as quick as possible. So basically, I Make This started in December 2019 with the idea of a Facebook group where any woman with a small business can share her work on social media without having to pay a fortune, basically. The concept was to add friends. So I was in touch with a few women that had their own small businesses, and I told them, instead of asking each other to share our work, how about we create this platform where actually we just share the work on it after we've added our network on it. So, oh, sorry. Join with the fluffy. So yeah, this is just one example of women who have to work while the kids are home. So this is a perfect example of it. Anyway, so I started off the group like this, and friends added friends, and then we just told people to start posting. And to our surprise, amazing stuff was being posted. And I think what made it a huge success is that people didn't realize this stuff was even available. So like they didn't know people were making this in Egypt, for example. Like they got to know so many creative jewelry designers, people who were doing like fashion items, special handmade home accessories, all kind of stuff that people had no idea of. And so eventually they started inviting each other without us asking anyone to invite anyone to the group. And in 1 month, the group was had more than 100,000 women on it. But what was more interesting was that those women posting on the group were selling like crazy. So they would post about their stuff, and then they would get all those crazy number of orders, and that's how it really helped them boost their sales, get more exposure. So it did what it was supposed to do. We took it to the next level by turning the group into an e-commerce platform. So basically what we did was turn I Make This into a website and a mobile app where a woman can go. It's more like of an Etsy model, if you're familiar with Etsy. So they can go on it, they open their online store, and then they can sell on it. I think what helped a lot with I Make This and what also made it really special is that each woman was presenting her story. And I think actually that is what made it successful. Because you weren't just, and we've tried this several times, even after the website, to just, like share products, and people were not buying. But when they were actually seeing the woman behind this product and her telling them her story and why because all those women were like Nadine was saying, they were either like women who were discovered passions, you know, women with discovered passions that had to give up something to be able to work on this passion, whether it's like giving up a job, a 9-to-5 job, and just deciding to start their own business, or whether because they're like full-time moms now, but they want to be doing something, so they were like searching for the passions and following it. So I think this gave it a lot of success, was based on the fact that people were relating to the story behind the product and not just the product. Yeah, so I think this is how it started, and this is where we are right now.
Thank you, Rania. I'll pick up with a few more questions about the model, but let me then move on to Marwa. And we've heard the story about opportunities for women, the flexibility, and the great window that was open to them, which is fantastic. Maybe you can tell us a bit more, and we'll move between opportunities and challenges, and feel free to take it whichever angle you'd like to. Thank you.
I actually think that it is both an opportunity and a threat, but also a challenge. And I'm going to pick up on the challenge bit in the second half of the webinar. Let me first very quickly lay a foundation before I speak and answer. Number one, the vast majority of women in Egypt and the Arab world are working in the informal sector. We know this, and that's why it's very important for us to focus here about this sector as we are in this webinar. Number two, the rate of the female labor force participation in the Arab region is actually the lowest in the whole world. Two reasons for this. Number one, family laws that require husbands' permission to work, travel, borrow from banks, etc. Of course, the social norms as well that her place is in the home, doing domestic labor and work and care work. Number two, which research has established, is the close relationship between women's domestic role inside the home and their ability to work outside the home as a result. So the more a woman has to do inside the home, usually for free, the less she is able to work outside the home for pay. And when she does both, there's a double burden for her to bear. Now, third point, UN Women reports show us that married women in Egypt spend 7 times as much time on domestic work as married men, while unmarried women spend 6 times as much as unmarried men, still very much. Number 4, recent figures from Egypt are indicative of the enormity of women's unpaid national contribution. Listen to these figures. Our unpaid domestic labor at home ranges between 20 and 30% of our national GDP. These are billions of dollars, and we're not getting a nickel in front of it. Yeah. 5, my final foundation point. These are 2 quotes I picked up from A2K's study that raised alarm bells for me when I started preparing for this webinar. And I'm quoting here the study. 2 participants pointed out that they are constantly either working or thinking about their work. Quote, "It is harder work. You are always working." End of quote. Another quote, "Running your business, it's a 24-hour job. I never switch off." And the final one, the most important for me, quote, "You are working nonstop before the kids wake up and after they sleep." And this is the bit I want to focus on here. And I'm grateful for Rania's child for walking into our Zoom call, because precisely all of us are facing the same. All of us with children who are now engaging on online work. It's exactly the same for us as women. I want to focus on the relationship between women's work in the informal digital economy and women's unpaid domestic and care work. Examples, we all know what unpaid domestic and care work is, cooking, grocery shopping, cleaning, managing the household, caring for the old, even the mental effort to manage all this. This is all productive work. Let's imagine, God forbid, a woman drops dead. The family has to go off and arrange for all these services to be done, but this time it has to be paid. Yeah. So this is the kind of work that women do inside of the home that affects her ability to go out and work in the informal digital economy just as much as in any other type of economy. And so it's very important for this study, when it looks at women's work, whether formal, informal, gig, digital, you name it, to look at a woman's time like a pie, different than a man, yeah? Because usually her time has to be divided between domestic and care work, which is usually unpaid, and the remaining time that is left for gainful work, whether formal or informal, digital or not digital. So my question here is, and that's for your amazing research, has women's work in the digital informal economy really provided an effective solution for the majority of women today who are caught between their obligation to do domestic and care work inside the home on one hand, and their need to work, make money, and be economically empowered on another. Has work in this digital informal economy truly liberated women? We need to ask this question. Has it increased women's free time as much as their bank accounts? Has that digitization of work relieved her domestic duties, for example? Has it contributed to her domestic work being remunerated, maybe? Has it actually increased women's well-being, especially women from the middle to lower classes of society? Or are these locked out of the opportunities of this digital sector? Or has digitization, and allow me here, please, the liberty to dramatize for more effect. Has digitization better exploited women's time for the economy's benefit? Has it, yes, helped her generate more income, but is leading to women's burnout, ill health, and higher stress levels with no social security, health insurance, pension, or benefits, despite their slightly bigger bank accounts? The pandemic is a very important signal for us. It's showing us that there's a real challenge facing women now. They have had the opportunity to do their paid work from home, but also they have borne the full brunt of the domestic labor. So what are we seeing today as a result? And increasing numbers of women leaving the labor force because they just can't cope. In the US, 4 times as many women as men dropped out of the labor force in September 2020. In September 2021, a further 300,000 jobs were lost by women who left their work. Note that September is the month when children start school and when these large numbers of women are leaving work. And so, before I quickly in point form answer your question, working from home, whether for paid, formal, informal, digital work, is not the panacea to solve women's work-life balance problems. In fact, it comes with a new set of challenges where women are seen as more available in the home now, where the lines between paid work and unpaid domestic work is blurred, contributing to more stress and pressures on women's time. I'm going to quote a relative of mine who is one of those engaging in the informal digital economy, and I called her for a quick, check, and she said, as long as she's at home, she is expected to manage the household efficiently. The women themselves usually don't even realize that they need to voice their need to dedicate time to their product. And finally, they are still expected to financially contribute to the finances if she's working. It's interesting that in your study, when talking about enablers and the enabling factors helping these women, no one mentioned help with domestic and care work, even though in many cases for women in the region, it is the #1 factor affecting women's ability to work and dedicate more time and energy. One of your respondents said that her husband is very supportive. If she has a lot of orders, her husband takes the day off to take care of their daughter. And that is very important to dig deeper into. So opportunities, final point, opportunities. It does use to its advantage the dominant and inhibiting social norms and traditions facing women's work, which sees women's place as the private sphere, not the public, doing domestic and care work, because here women are mostly working from home. Second, opportunity. There's no need here for a husband's permission to go out of the home and work, where by law women are required to, yeah? Here they work from home, enabling women to attain some level of economic empowerment. Threats, #1, burnout. I've already referred to the quotes above. #2, locking women's activity within the private sphere, blocking her effectively out of the public sphere as an equal citizen with equal rights. #3, it might give a somewhat false impression that it's a panacea solution for the problems of women's work, while in reality, all 3, informal, digital, gig, traditional, informal work, are precarious, not giving women working in these sectors social security, health insurance, pension schemes, and benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marwa. That's quite a bit to take in. Thank you very much. Excellent feedback. And I'm going to turn to Christine. You guys you've done fantastic work with women all over the world and in Egypt, and you have covered several of the points that were covered by Marwa, and you've also listened to Rania's great project and the opportunities that are given to women. So I would love to hear from you, up to 5 minutes, please, your feedback on this or any related topic that you'd like to take forward with this regarding opportunities and challenges of the new digital entrepreneurship online. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nagla, it's a bit hard to follow Marwa because she just schooled us all. So I'm going to drill in on a few points that she raised. And I think digitalization is just yet another platform to view women's engagement as entrepreneurs, be it formal or informal. The vast majority are informal. A key point behind that is there's a lot of assumptions that there's a safety in remaining informal. There's ease of doing business is too complex. There's this, there's that. I don't know what. My neighbor's husband's uncle told me this, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of misinformation and not easy enough to gain the information of, if I want to establish my business in the formal sector, what are the exact steps I have to do? How is that different if I'm online versus not online? And what are the legal frameworks behind that? A really important thing that we often forget when we talk about women as entrepreneurs is they are employers. So in as much as that they, as business owners, are unprotected in the informal sector, so is everyone that works for them. There is no legal framework under which a person can fall under, even if they're working full-time, that says, protect me. These are my rights. They are inherent in any labor code, but if the labor code doesn't specify it in a particular way, especially when you get into the issue of independently owned businesses, it gets very complex. I think another point is whenever we talk about women-owned businesses, we very quickly get into we start speaking of women in the informal sector. And for all the reasons I just said, I think a key point is it's very difficult to do an assessment of this without tailoring it to the types of women that enter as women-owned businesses. The vast majority of women around the world start their own businesses for the reasons that your study pulled out. Flexibility, I can manage my own time, I'm my own boss. It sounds so fantastic. It's quite exhausting though, if you are not able to hire more people. And it has in no way treated with the fact that you're superwoman now, because you're managing and starting this business while also managing everything else that required you to have that flexibility in the first place. And your community, maybe your family, your community has not shifted their mindset on your roles, but the economy has turned around and said, no, we all have to be out there chipping in. And so you have the women that start out of need. And then you have the women who start out because they've done a market assessment, they see a gap in the market and they want to fill that gap. Now, when you talk about the needs and what UN Women does, for example, around the world, what we do for these two groups is vastly different between the two groups, yeah? And the first group, it is often trainings around use of technology to help you. Also being aware that more women using technology are also vulnerable to what the negative side of technology, which is cyber violence and bullying, cyberbullying. And a lot of women-owned businesses can be much more vulnerable to that, particularly in countries where women are expected to not be seen in a way that online business can often do. They often don't have a market assessment. They haven't developed a business case. They are using this model as a way of trying to fill gaps. And sometimes they do it successfully. We work with Procter & Gamble and Benny Swaif and Minya, and we work with a lot of rural women, helping them become distributors. And many of them that we've worked with want to then go online and start distributing online, thereby tackling another assumption that we often make, that in rural areas, use of digital technology isn't going to help you as an entrepreneur. We're not seeing that in a comprehensive way. We see pockets of it, but many people are online and we don't have the figures for that. I think a key point to remember is when you're functioning in the informal sector, you don't have any safety net. And if the universal health care insurance isn't available, or you don't trust in the systems that are available, your vulnerability is ever present until you reach a certain level as an entrepreneur. And it's very hard when talking about women entrepreneurs to silo it out from how much a government is investing in early childhood care, how much communities trust government-run early childhood care in any country, how affordable that is, how judged she will be by her family for doing this. If she's a single mother, does she risk actually her ex-husband taking the children back if she's put them in child or a daycare of some sort? So all of that, versus how do I access credit when I am still judged by banks as a higher risk, despite the fact that I have a much higher repayment as a group, as a gender, than men in this country. The risks of taking on further debt, and my team, who had to educate me greatly on the gig economy as I was reading your report, they pointed out a few things. Globally, we know that actually 60%, it's mostly the gig economy is male dominated, but regardless of gender, 60% of those operating the gig economy are highly educated. So this, even the Uber drivers, et cetera, they are highly educated people that are comfortable in a frame of technology. There's still risks within that for women. So if I was to boil everything down, I'd say that as you go forward, you need to really tailor the groups that you're looking at, the types of risks you look at versus why am I an entrepreneur in the first place? I guess that's the best way to put it. Why did I decide to go and become a women-owned business versus and what are my needs because of that and the risks? And the flip side of that is you simply cannot silo out the business complexities of ease of doing business in Egypt from all of the other legislative realities and access to service realities. These are improving. A lot of the services are improving, but it comes to my third point, which UN Women hammers on all the time. Until my husband and my mother-in-law think it's acceptable for someone else to help me with all of the work in the home, I'm stuck here as Superwoman. And it doesn't work for a long period. It doesn't work. It will break you as much as a 9-to-5 job, much more than a 9-to-5 job. So I don't mean to be negative, but there's just for us, digitalization is yet another platform through which we look at women's entrepreneurship. It's not the defining one way or the other. It's not better or worse. It's just another platform for a view. I really liked the study. All of the economic empowerment team here really enjoyed reading this study. It got us talking quite a bit internally because we're now shaping our next 5-year plan. So thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Christine. I appreciate your comments and your, positive feedback. It is, we find it out of the box because it is an area of research that people are not really zooming in on. So we're happy to take it, further. So thank you for that. I have a lot of follow-up questions and I want to go back to Rania, but I'll do that in a bit. Before I do that, I'll turn to Huda. Just the key words that I got from both Christine and Marwa. You mentioned skills, stories, flexibilities, challenges to being online, risks of having or starting a business, banking, credit, enabling environment, legislative realities. I'm always, as you both were speaking, I was thinking of persisting risks, what are the new challenges? What are challenges that are there, same old, same old? So all of this is in my head and I'll take to the next round. But I want to give Huda a chance at this point because the word stories, I know, Huda, through, Women and Memory Forum, you've done a lot of work with women and not only with storytelling as a methodology, but maybe you tell us also about the stories of women. I picked up on Rania's comment about the stories of women. How important is the story and how does it fit into this research and further based also on a very important point that Rania made. Huda, to you, go ahead.
Thank you, Nagla. Thank you to the team. And yes, definitely, I'll pick up on the word story really, because it's very inspiring. And let me just tell Rania that, of course, I am part of the group. I make this and it's been so beneficial. I follow it closely. And she said the success of most of these initiatives is based on the fact that people related to the story. And I found that very inspiring, frankly. So I enjoyed your project very much. Again, you talk about investigating realities and capturing narratives of women's work. And again, so the key word actually for me is narratives, stories of women, and how these stories are key to understanding the complexities and challenges facing women in general. So, my intervention here will be just about two things, really, about a little bit about my experience and storytelling within the Women in Memory Forum. And then in the next round, I just talk a little bit about storytelling as methodology, because I thought this might be perhaps hopefully useful. Okay, so Just to contextualize, I'm part of the Women Memory Forum. We're an organization that started in '95 and focus on gender and women's studies. And we really, I mean, our mandate is that we believe that obstacles facing women is the scarcity of alternative cultural information and knowledge about the diverse roles of women in history and in contemporary societies. And we sort of work on various projects to support this aim to produce alternative knowledge. Now, one of our key contributions, I think, is this emphasis on the importance of narratives, both past and present. And so we have an archive of women's voices established in the late 1990s, and it focuses on reviving the memory of forgotten women in history. Now, to talk about the importance of capturing these narratives or stories, it works on so many levels. It's consciousness raising, it highlights injustices and challenges. Sharing success stories can inspire and motivate, but at the same time, sharing stories that embody real obstacles and challenges, stories that do not necessarily qualify as success stories in the strict sense of the word, but are nevertheless testimony to women's agency and ability, are still really important. I mean, they have an empowering effect on many levels. I'd like to use here a literary concept, the idea of defamiliarization. Stories defamiliarize. So it's one of my favorite concepts. They make the familiar unfamiliar. They enable a new perspective on the ordinary and the taken for granted. So let us not underestimate the hold of the taken for granted on our consciousness. So assumptions about women can or cannot do, men are more technically savvy than women. I mean, there are so many stereotypical ideas that circulate. But a story about a woman tech genius can literally transform ideas about the taken for granted radically. So stories matter. Also, narratives from the past are also very important in challenging stereotypical dogma about women's traditional roles, the myth about their absence from the public sphere in pre-modern times. I mean, these stories really can shake some of the dogmas that exist in societies. And I just need to refer to work by my colleagues, Umayma Abu Bakr and Huda Saadi, who published really important work on women faqihat, women teachers, women physicians in early Islamic periods. So basically blasting some of these key entrenched ideas about what women did not do in pre-modern times. So in general, I would say, so stories when shared can be powerful, can be enablers for action, for validation, for reassurance. And for a woman struggling to make a living in an all-male domain, she feels not alone and can learn from other experience. So this is my shout out for stories. I leave storytelling to the next round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hoda. Rania, I want to come back to you. Tell us a bit more. You heard the interventions of the speakers. You've had a fantastic turnout of women, starting their businesses, joining the platform. We're all members of the group. We see what's going on, and it's expanding. So you're doing something right. I mean, tell us more about how this initiative, how this project is maybe taking over or addressing some of the challenges that have been there before. How can we work together, learn more from you about taking this forward? What is it, doing to address challenges that have been there before, and what else needs to be done? Okay, so your call. I know it's not easy, but we're thinking together. I mean, we want to believe it. So
there's something pretty interesting happening actually now that how like the state is really not going to allow any kind of informal businesses anymore, and it's continuously making the grip tighter and tighter. So actually we are currently in the middle of where those women, they're going to have to choose very soon whether they want to go on or not, because most of those women, the way they work is that they sell online, but they also rely heavily on bazaars, where they go and they sell in those on-ground activities. And from what I've learned over the past 2 years being involved with them and conducting even our own I Make This bazaars, is that they sell much more on those on-ground activities than what they sell all year long online. So the bazaars are very important for them. And what's happening now is and it just happened as of 2022, is that no woman is going to be allowed to sell in a bazaar if she doesn't have a registered business with the taxes authorities. So, and this is going to be mandatory because all the venues that actually conduct those events, they now will not be accepting any woman that doesn't have this. And I'm currently noticing how this is going to change a lot of things, because many of those women, I think Christine was the one who mentioned that a lot of women do not want to register because it's the unknown, you know, like it's complex. It's not easy here in Egypt, especially because there's so many misinformation. Even like if they go to different authorities, they tell them different things. And so it's really confusing. We've tried to even have like info sessions for them, and it was surprising how everyone who came out said something that was different from someone else who came and spoke. And so, I mean, even the regulations are not clear. And so now it's, I'm witnessing this. A lot of women are saying, so those who want to expand, like also, I think someone mentioned this idea of expansion. I think it was Nadine when she talked about some of them, they want to register because they know they want to grow. And the only way for them to grow beyond a certain level is to register. So those women will actually go ahead and register. But a lot of women who are working informally, they do not want this extra hassle because of everything else they're handling already, you know, like, I mean, I think I make this, it made their lives easier in, you know, like ticking one of the boxes, you know, I've always said this when we've created the group, that because those women who work informally, like at home, they are indeed expected to be taking care of everything else at home. So like you're working from home, so you're actually home, so you should be like able to go pick up the kids when it's pickup time from school. If a kid is sick, you're going to take care of the kids, you're going to have to cook, you're going to have to do everything else, and plus working from home on whatever the project you're working on. So the thing is, those women, they're already going through, you know, like hell in their mind, like they really want their business to work, but they also want to take care of the house. So what I make this did was, you know, remove that extra hassle of thinking about marketing, because this is one of the, it's a very important thing to do, especially on social media, and it was becoming super complicated. So I make this came, and all of a sudden it was so easy for them to tell a lot of interested people that they exist. So it gave them this opportunity. But now I think they're going to start facing this next question of, so what's next? How much do I really want to keep doing this? Because they will no longer be able to do it the older way. Khalas, it's no longer going to work. It's either they have to make up their minds. It's either I'm going to register and go and move into the formal market. And honestly, they're moving without knowing the next steps. So they don't know if they're going to be worse off. A lot of them believe they're going to be worse off, and they're super scared and everything, but they feel that's the only way they can continue working. Or a lot are deciding to just stick to being a really, really tiny, small online business where you cannot, like you said, you cannot sell on websites. Like not everyone would be able to sell on websites anymore if they're not registered. They cannot participate in on-ground events. So basically, in a way or another, I think this informal sector will fade away with time, because it's going to be very difficult to survive unless it's just a hobby, a pure hobby, you know, where you're just selling like a few pieces a year, but not to really maintain something that can economically empower this woman.
Thank you, Rania. I'm going to move to Christine then, because you mentioned quite a bit about the formalizing and, you know, the threat and the legislative, environment and the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure as well. So what can be, just from your experience as well, whether it may be that surrounding infrastructure or legislative environment for that kind of work, or the skills, you know, also, because I noticed that you and women, you also do quite a bit on developing digital skills and maybe also marketing skills for women. How can, how can there be a positive way forward given the scenario for this model of entrepreneurship today? Your thoughts?
I think a lot of steps are in place. I just think it's scale that's going to matter, scale and reach. How do you reach women at the bazaar level in all of these communities all over Egypt? It is so difficult. I mean, we know that the Business Support Unit, the National Council for Women, that's a key part of what they try to do at the governorate level, but that's at a district level. You have to be able to know, to go and to get that. There's no question that the lack of understanding of the procedure and the mistrust of the procedures, and the fact that when you go to different government offices, you might get very conflicting, that is a challenge. I think what we hear, though, and most of the work that we do as UN Women around women's access to decent work in the country is with the government, and there's not a lot of interest in penalizing those who can't go that step of becoming women-owned businesses. We don't work with the tax authority, mind you, but all of the other ministries that we work with, it's very much about them accessing the skills they need. We have a large program with UNIDO that is very focused on women's entrepreneurship. It's supported by the government of Canada. At the start, we did an assessment of, I think it's about 145 women who own businesses all over the country. A lot of assumptions kind of fell away, and some assumptions stayed. So 56% of those women we talked to are very comfortable using digital technology, and they saw a lot of benefits to them. And these are from the smallest, one employee herself, to 10, 20 employees. They saw a lot of benefits that we've discussed, but they also saw challenges to conducting business online. And we certainly see that with the rural women we've worked with who want to sell online, which is, there's actually a very high competition when you go online, and it's hard to penetrate the market. That market is, it's vast and it's scattered. Online shopping isn't as trusted in rural areas as it is in urban areas. So for the bazaars, those are still the most trusted way, or women going to women in their homes. That is still highly trusted. And we support a lot of women who have that type of women-owned business. They buy a little tuk-tuk, they drive from client to client throughout Beni Suef, for example, selling household items. There is a fact that we've also seen during COVID is it's very hard to increase your sales despite everyone being locked down because of the vastness of that market. So only 30% of the women entrepreneurs we interviewed saw an increase in their sales during COVID, but that's because they had a pre-existing strength online. We tried and we continue to develop women's strength online in response to COVID, but it was the people that had a firm standing beforehand that were best placed. I think it is an important point. We see this in all of our work around legislation, family law, otherwise, the work we do with women escaping violence, their knowledge, the work we do with lawyers whose knowledge about the procedural aspects of family law versus their own personal belief of what should happen. Information, reliable, one source information is essential, but it's very difficult because owning a business, there's not many countries in the world where when you own a business, it's one source of information. You have to talk to the tax authorities. You have to talk to the different regulatory bodies. I think there's a lot of hope. We do a lot of tailored training courses. We do a lot at the ideation stage, and that's where we're also seeing trends in terms of the development partners. So a lot of focus on women who are starting up their businesses. I do think that's a good thing in the sense that there's more chance of education. A part of what we do is help the women understand how to become formalized business and the process that but we really want to expand the number of NGOs, for example, that are comfortable with talking about this. And that's one thing we've noticed. Many of the NGOs are very comfortable in talking about the challenges, but they themselves don't have access to reliable, quotable, these are the procedures. And so we'd also like to see that change over time as well, because at the community level, community-based organizations of all types are going to be trusted in this regard. So, and that's where we'd like to see a little more emphasis there. I don't know if I addressed your question or not.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. No, very useful. Thank you, Christine. Now I want to turn to Marwa, and I want to pick up on something Rania said, which I find very useful. You said something about how this platform helps with marketing. I know that Marwa is going to tell us a bit about, you mentioned something about the threats. We know that this model is not a panacea, but what rays of hope can we pull? And you mentioned something that it helps with marketing. So the platform is doing something for women that they were not able to do otherwise in previous entrepreneurship models, etc. So I want Marwa to tell us a bit more about what you see as the potential challenges or threats for this, given that there are some opportunities as well. Marwa, your call, the next few minutes. Please go ahead.
Sure. So I had some suggested questions for the future phase of the research, which I can share with you later, but a lot of them have to do with the domestic unpaid labor that she has to do, a woman has to do, and now she has to decide whether it's really worth it to go and formalize. I mean, she's doing that work inside the home, she's doing it in other work informally outside the home, and she was making a little bit of profit. Now, if she's going to have to pay taxes for it, is it really worth the stress? That's a question that, as Rania is saying, is a lot of women have to face now. Maybe not a lot of men, yeah, because of the unpaid care work part of the decision. Now, from what Rania was saying and from what Christine was saying, I think it is important to, of course, it's an opportunity to raise the awareness of women on how to market their businesses, how to manage time. But also when it comes to unpaid care work, maybe, and Christine has mentioned family law here, maybe also some awareness raising needs to be done, informing women that actually Muslim family law does not oblige women with unpaid care work. Yeah, and if she does it, she has to get paid for it. Now that's on a very theoretical level. How can we take this down to real life? She still has to wash the dishes. She still has to take care of the kids, bring them to school and all that. And moving forward, so let me start with the question. So maybe in the next phase, you can ask the other respondents, how has this type of work, the informal digital economy, how has it affected or been affected by the unpaid domestic and care work that you have to do at home? Is the domestic and care work an enabling or disabling factor for your business? Do you feel burnt out? Yeah. Compared to previous work you did in the formal or informal sector, do you feel that you now have a better life-work balance? Do you have time for yourself? How much time do you have for yourself? Do you have social security, health insurance, pension scheme, benefits, and so on? But moving forward on care work, there's an important study done by the UN Women recently on the role of the care economy in promoting gender equality. And it's online. I'm not going to repeat the last section. You can all go and check it out, where there are things to be done on easing the domestic burden on women to enable them to tap onto all these opportunities, whether informal digital economy or any other form of work. One of them is that this domestic work be shared between women and men. Yeah, there's a lot written about that can be easily found out. But also another way forward is to increase care services, yeah? So to have more nurseries, more old people's home, extending education services for earlier ages, and thus, quote unquote, liberating women from having to do all this domestic work so that they can have more time to do the either formal or informal work. But I'm going to speak here as a mother, yeah, and a working woman at the same time. I'm not sure that this is the main solution, to outsource care completely outside of the family. Yes, it's important to do so for both women and men to work outside the home. But I think we are today, and COVID has done us a favor, we are being called to make a conscientious pause, yeah, to be quiet and sit with ourselves and ask ourselves, what is the model of work that we want, really, for both women and men? Yeah, what is the nature of work? Is it a way to maximize goods in the market with the lowest cost at the expense of everything else, including the human being's well-being? I mean, post-COVID, we are pushed by women themselves to rethink how we view and define work. This is a bigger question, really, than the research. But this research, this is what the work you're doing is really amazing, because it's pushing us to ask these big questions. Yeah, this COVID situation is asking us to rethink how we view and define work. Women are leaving paid work because it's no longer working for them in light of other factors in their lives. And I want to raise, for us to remind ourselves with Schumacher's classical work, E.F. Schumacher's Small is Beautiful. Yeah, it has a very important chapter on Buddhist economics, for example. And he shows us that while classical economics, which govern us till today, it's mainly interested in goods, Buddhist economics, on the other hand, and I would say any kind of spiritually based kind of economics, is mainly interested in liberation. Yeah, it sees the function of work as giving a person a chance to develop their faculties, overcome egocentridness by joining others in a common task, to create goods and services needed for a becoming existence, not to slave away, as we're seeing happening today. And it makes no difference whether it's the formal economy, the informal economy, the digital economy, the face-to-face economy. Really, we are being called to a conscientious pause with ourselves to ask, what kind of work setup do we all want for women and men today in our economies? Yeah. And I'll end this here. I know this is much bigger than the research, but your research is actually very important because it's pointing us to this really bigger questions up there that are governing all of us. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you very much, Marwa. Let me then turn to Huda to tell us about methodology, storytelling methodology in the next few minutes before we start the Q&A. Please go ahead, Huda.
Thanks, Nagla. So I won't be long. Yes, storytelling is methodology. I think, again, let me repeat that how stories are very powerful tools for revealing the hidden and for gaining insight into experiences. And I mean, the project is all about understanding women's experiences and what is it that they're doing, what is it that they need, and so on. But experiences are, I mean, one of the things that we need to figure here is this whole issue of meta-narratives. Just we expand a little bit. So all of our stories are usually molded or framed within what we can describe as meta-narratives. And these are hegemonic narratives about gendered roles, about the world. I mean, these are the stories we hear about what women's place in the home, men go out to work. I mean, meta-narratives that kind of are taken for granted ideas. They can be challenged, but they still, but they continue. Now, so for example, the idea that an ambitious woman is usually frowned upon because it implies that somehow she puts work before family. So it's not good. So it's good to be ambitious as a man, but as a woman, you usually play down your ambition. You don't really talk about it because otherwise society might frown upon you. So these are all sort of like meta-narratives. Now, and they continue. Now, most of us narrate ourselves within this meta-narrative, most of us. Now, we can either accept the narrative, rebel against it, apologize because we do not fit, but there's always, usually in any story, there's an interaction with this meta-narrative. So women, a very ambitious woman, successful businesswoman, makes millions of pounds, but she will then make sure to talk about why she wakes up in the morning and makes breakfast for her children. I mean, this is something that men don't necessarily feel that they need to say when they're narrating their stories. So anyway, now, but let me just say that these meta-narratives are not just assumed and internalized by the narrators, but also consciously or unconsciously, they find their way into our own research hypotheses and our questions. So, okay, so what do we do? Now, stories about our lives, our work, family, they were often, as I said, structured along these lines. But the challenge for me as a researcher is how can we find this break in a story, a detail, a word that can potentially lead to an insight that is not necessarily framed within this meta-narrative. So as researchers, how can we enable these breaks, insights? Not easy, but we can try. So I'm just going to, in 1 minute, say two things. So I looked at the questions. I found them fantastic. They're excellent. They cover all the points, many points. Obviously, more questions can be added. The method is semi-structured interviews, perfect. The questions, I assume, are like guidelines. I mean, so very important for the interviewer. The challenge is, how can the questions for me, the challenge for me, and just can be less leading, meaning. So you have a very good question, and we've been talking, I pick up this question because you've been talking about it. Would you like to formalize your business? Very important question, very important for the research, but this is a leading question. I mean, it is pointing towards a particular point. Now, perhaps before we ask the leading question, maybe we can ask, how do you see the future for your business? Maybe formalizing is not really the point or the issue that this woman particularly wants to think about. You know, maybe like, I don't know, maybe 50% of the responses will be within your expectations. I mean, but there might be a break. You might have this answer that is insightful and that takes you somewhere else completely. So this is, and it's worth it. I mean, sometimes so this is one point. Second point, questions about perceptions of online business. Now, I think we've talked a little bit about this, and Marwa touched upon this. I mean, family perceptions, friends, do they consider it a business at all? Really, I mean, again, you see, I personally, even though I have a job but I basically work from home. And I totally understand what it means to be working from home, where nobody, thinks of your work as work. I mean, this is not work. You're sitting at home, so you answer the telephone. If you don't answer the telephone, then something's wrong. You're not being very polite to your mother-in-law, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is personal experience. So actually, working from home is extremely challenging. So anyway, so perceptions, how people, how your family, your friends, your community, okay. Finally, questions that encourage sharing a story. I think that's really important. Stories of how the idea came about. Again, Rania touched upon this, really interesting. How it all started, story about a challenge, story about a setback, stories about a moment of a breakthrough. So basically, how is it that this, your methodology really incorporates storytelling as part of our attempt to understand and find out, and learn from women's narratives. I stop here.
Thank you very much, Hoda. This is super, super useful. These are great insights. Allow me, in the time that we have, to just, take a few Q&A from the audience. I'm going to read a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask the speakers to respond to them. But also, in the interest of time, in your responses, just if you can give us your last, your final word. And really, really, what I'm hoping to take us to think about is, how can this business be different? How can this be different? How can this take us forward in a way that other initiatives have not done before? It is super interesting, it's successful, it's creative, it's innovative, it's no longer an initiative, it's an established form of entrepreneurship. So please keep that in mind. So I'm just going to pick 2 or 3 questions from my screen. The team have curated the questions. And one of the questions says, formalizing is a hassle, but are there any benefits to women formalizing these businesses? Will it help promote more decent work conditions? Will we see incubators and venture capitalists? This is one question. Targeting women-led businesses, or will this burden them even more? And I want to emphasize the last part of the question, because Nadine wrote me here, we have a conversation going. An interview said she was invited to an incubator, but was very intimidated by the male-dominated business jargon that put her off from pursuing it further. So my question to this long question is, when will we see a stronger women's presence, incubators and venture capitalists coming from I Make This and others? This is one question for you to reflect on in your final comments. Another question was talking more about the range of products that they are being sold on I Make This. But I would also like to add, does it matter? Does it matter the type of product or type of business? Does it make a difference in women's, how women handle their business, or the opportunities that are given to them? That's a second point that are also, given. And then the third question is, what room is there for women's agency in challenging gender roles? Are there any positive outcomes from women harnessing the digital technologies? So these are 3 open questions. One of them about the activities, the initiative, the different businesses in I Make This, and whether the products make a difference in the type of issues that we raised. The second one is about formalizing, and when would we see them as part of the incubators and venture capitalists, and what challenges are there. And the third point was about really the women's agency in challenging the gender roles. There are general questions, open questions for our speakers to tackle, bearing in mind to just think with us on how can we make things, how can this make things differently? How can we move forward using this opportunity? So I would go in any, please speakers, if you'd like to speak, I don't want to go in any special order, so just wave at me and start. I leave it to you, whoever would like to take the plunge to tackle any of the three questions and make their final comment regarding on how can this make things differently. So who would like to speak? Rania, please start.
Okay, yeah. I think it's a mix for me. I think, look, formalizing, yes, I do think there are, at the end of the day, more benefits. I say that in no means dismissing the complexity of it, but I also challenge back, and we've seen this, I'm talking now 25 years of working with women entrepreneurs, and I don't know how many different country contexts. You need to think about why you became a business owner, and then decide if formalization is the route for you. Yeah, that is crucial, because it isn't snip, snap, snip. Yeah, it is crucial. We are seeing more and more, and you're seeing a lot of the development partners that are channeling money to loans. So let's talk about the banks, EBRD, World Bank, EIB, so African Development Bank. They are prioritizing, when they channel money to the incubators, they are prioritizing a certain threshold going to women. Now, where I would say in the development community we need to push back is, how are they defining entrepreneurship? How are they defining MSME? That's always been a big challenge for women-owned businesses, because if it's 100 employees and above, okay, well, this is not a vulnerable group to start with in the first place. So the other point I would make is, we are working more and more as UN Women around gender lens investing, because what we've seen, and if you follow the global trajectory, is at a certain point, the venture capitalists and most businesses in the West have recognized it's simply good business to adopt some aspects of gender lens investing. It is a good business model. And so in the work that we do on the women's empowerment principles, of which there's an enormous uptake in Egypt, we have private companies, banks, venture capitalists coming to us wanting to understand more about this. So we are seeing that trend. And I put that trend in the same pocket as I put the greater interest in socially responsive investment opportunities that people want to make in this day and age. I think where it's difficult in Egypt, but not impossible, is there's so much support out there for women-owned businesses from the international community and from national NGOs. It's so much. But how to know, in your governorate, in your area, in your district, how to know. And I would love to be part of something that tries to bring that together. Simply, we don't rate it. We don't say it's good or bad. We simply say, this is what you have in your area. On women's agency, that's the last point I want to make. There's no question that there is countless examples of women's agency expanding because of digitalization and them taking advantage of digitalized platforms, either wholeheartedly in the way that you've assessed in your study, that particular genre, or is a vehicle for what they do. But the caution, and I said it at the start, women who own businesses are also employers. And we should never make the assumption that because it's a woman owning the business, that there's guaranteed decent work and family-friendly work for the employers under that business. They do not get a free ride because they now have voice and agency. And if we use the West as a point of comparison, there is a lot of data out there that says that women who own businesses are no better or no worse than men who own businesses in terms of helping their community advance women's own voice and agency at the community level, or even their own employees. So I do want to flag that point that that they have as much a responsibility as anyone else. And sometimes that gets forgotten in the dialogue, especially at national level. So.
Thank you, Christine. Rania, go ahead.
Okay.
Much a responsibility as anyone national level. So thank you.
Right. So I'll quickly say that I make this basically, it helps any woman with a small business as long as she's making a product locally here in Egypt. So like she doesn't buy something from abroad and then sells it. If she's actually making a product, then she can market it on I Make This. It's usually artistic handmade stuff most of the time, but anything else also works as long as it's made in Egypt. But I want to touch on something here because I was personally interested when we started the e-commerce platform that sometimes those women got a lot of orders that they weren't able to actually even meet. And I realized that that's when they told me, okay, no, you need to stop. No, don't market for us anymore. And then I said, aren't you interested in like making this grow? And if you're getting more orders, don't you want to meet those orders? And a lot of times I got the response that, no, I'm not interested. I'm happy with things the way they are. And this is where my answer to the question of whether registration is good for them or not, it really depends on, as Christine said, what they want out of this business. A lot of women, which I met through I Make This, and I'm saying a lot because I'm a researcher myself, so I always rely on surveys. So I asked the makers I have on my platform, and a lot of them said that growing beyond what they can make themselves is not a goal that they have. So and that's why their priority was to sell what they can make, but they're not interested in growing or like even like hiring more people. I asked if we can help with them hiring, and they said no, we enjoy doing this. A lot of them said we enjoy doing this. You'd be helping us a lot to help us sell what we make. But we're not interested in growing beyond that. Of course, it matters from a woman to another and the goal, but we did hear this a lot. And that it wasn't funding they didn't want to, they just wanted to sell what they were making. And in this case, honestly, formalization becomes an extra burden instead of helping them because they're not interested in growing. They're not interested in being able to sell elsewhere, you know. It's just an extra burden for them, which in many cases I've heard it, you know what, I'm just gonna stop if it's going to be that way. It's not worth it for me. Although by working, she's actually empowering herself economically. That's the amount of money she feels she needs, and she's getting it through her informal work. But if it's going to be much more complicated, it's going to make her stop rather than grow.
This is super interesting. Thank you, Rania. This is super interesting. Marwa, would you like to say a few words? And what I mean.
Nothing at all, except that Rania's last point was beautiful to hear. And this is, for me, the personification of what Buddhist economics is, really. I mean, thank you very much.
Hada, would you like to address?
Just to say that, I mean, actually, yes, I wanted to comment on what Rania said. I mean, there you are. I mean, the women are saying something different from, how shall I say it, hegemonic expectations, if I can use the term. I mean, and here there is this idea that more is less, actually. And for them, it's what they have is fine. And I find that really interesting. I mean, I think that could be one of the really interesting findings. Yeah.
I think this is very interesting, and it relates to Huda when we assume certain things are going to happen, or we assume certain intentions which are not really what is happening on the ground. We've done in our research, we do a lot of work in different parts of Africa, and we have learned that what we find on the ground is sometimes contrary to what is sort of a mainstream assumption, or of what things should be or should not be. So I mean, this is we are out of time, but this is super insightful, and I cannot thank you all enough. You have given us plenty of food for thought. We certainly are going to go back to the field and continue our research in this particular phase. But this conversation is not, is going to go on even beyond this particular research. I'm very happy that we have started, new initiatives, new ideas. And what remains for me is to thank everyone, our speakers in no special order. I mean, Rania, Christine, Marwa, and also Hoda, or also friends, old friends and new friends. Many thanks to Richard Probst and FES, and to Nadine Wahib, my ROC and Associate Director, and the rest of the A2K4D team. Please know that we are going to post this webinar, and do know that this is one webinar in a series of activities that we are doing in proud partnership with FES Egypt, as we continue the conversation on work, inclusion, the future and the present, the current reality of work, the inclusion in the digital economy since the onset of COVID, and hopefully post COVID-19. So many, many thanks to you, to the audience, to everybody. The conversation continues, and please look out for more from us and from FES Egypt. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Many thanks to my speakers and the team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.